In the midst of the turbulence of the early church, a young man named Mark found himself at the heart of a revolution that would change the world. He wasn't one of the 12 apostles, but his name would be etched in history forever. Growing up in a home dedicated to faith, Mark was surrounded by the great figures of the early church: Peter, Paul, and Barnabas. His mother Mary's house was one of the first secret meeting places for Christians, where the earliest followers of Christ gathered to pray and study the Word. Acts 12, verse 12. There, Mark witnessed miracles, persecutions, and the unwavering courage of those who followed Christ. From a very young age, he gained a unique perspective on the challenges and victories of those laying the foundation of Christianity. But Mark's journey wasn't easy. He began with great enthusiasm, but at a crucial moment he faltered, an error that would cost him dearly, even being rejected by Paul. However, his story doesn't end there. Mark wasn't defined by his failure, but by his redemption. The young man who abandoned the mission would become the man who wrote one of the most widely read Gospels of all time. His life is proof that God can use even those who fail to accomplish something great. Today, let's dive into the incredible journey of Mark, a man who stumbled but rose to become one of the most iconic figures in Christianity. Imagine this: a young man growing up in the heart of early Christianity, surrounded by the greats, Peter, Paul, and Barnabas. John Mark came from a family deeply involved in the movement. His mother, Mary, was a woman of faith, known for hosting secret Christian meetings in her home. Acts 12, verse 12. This made Mary's home a crucial point in the early church, a place where Christians gathered to pray and strengthen one another. When the first Christians faced persecution, homes like Mary's were sacred refuges, places of hope and resistance. John Mark grew up in this faith-filled environment, hearing stories about Jesus and witnessing powerful examples of courage and devotion from leaders like Peter, Paul, and Barnabas. He wasn't just an observer. He was being shaped for a higher purpose. With so many spiritual influences around him, John Mark was not just another observer. He had the connections, faith, and opportunity to be part of something much bigger. It wasn't just about following in someone's footsteps. He was being called to walk alongside the giants of the faith. And indeed, when Barnabas and Paul embarked on their first missionary journey, guess who decided to follow along? That's right, John Mark. He saw this opportunity as a chance to put his faith into action, to be part of something grand. It was his chance to spread the message of Christ around the world, to witness the wonders God was performing in people's lives. For a young man like Mark, it seemed like the call of a lifetime. But this is where things take a dramatic turn. At some point during the journey, John Mark did the unthinkable. He abandoned the mission and went back home. Acts 13, verse 13. The decision to leave wasn't just about physical exhaustion or discomfort. We don't know exactly why, but the Bible gives us clues. Perhaps he was afraid. The fear of the unknown is a powerful enemy, and for a young man, the difficulties of the mission could have been overwhelming. Maybe he was homesick. The pull of home, especially in difficult times, is hard to resist. Or perhaps he felt the mission was beyond his strength and capacity at that moment. Whatever it was, his decision to leave was seen as a failure. And for Paul, this was unacceptable. He couldn't understand how someone with so much potential could quit so easily. What happened next was a real division between the great leaders of the church. When Barnabas wanted to give Mark a second chance and take him on the second missionary journey, Paul didn't want to hear about it. The wound of his disappointment was still too fresh. He felt betrayed, and more than that, he couldn't trust Mark again with such an important task. The mission of spreading the gospel was crucial, and Paul felt that someone who had abandoned the mission couldn't be relied upon. An argument arose so intense between them that they parted ways. Acts 15, verses 37 to 39. Barnabas, known for his encouraging spirit, took Mark under his wing, while Paul went in another direction. The separation was painful and a shock to the early church. But instead of seeing this as the end, we can view it as a transformation, a change of scenery for Mark, who now had the chance to grow in a different way, under the guidance of Barnabas, the son of encouragement. The separation of Barnabas and Paul, though difficult, was a reflection of God's grace in action, allowing Mark to be shaped in a unique way. This could have been the end of John Mark's story. He could have been remembered simply as the one who couldn't handle the pressure of the mission, the man who failed in the face of the challenge. But that's not what happened. John Mark didn't let his failure define him. Instead, he embraced the opportunity to learn and grow. He was discipled by Barnabas, who once again proved to be a key figure in his journey of transformation. But Barnabas wasn't the only mentor Mark found. Under Barnabas's guidance, John Mark grew. He matured both in his faith and as a man. He didn't allow his initial mistake to define him. Amidst his failures and challenges, he reconnected with another great leader, Peter. Peter, who knew all too well what it meant to fail and be restored, who could forget his denial of Christ, took John Mark under his protection. He called him my son, 1 Peter 5 verse 13, something that reflects the deep mentorship and spiritual support. Peter, more than anyone, understood what it was like to fall and rise again. Peter's kindness wasn't just friendship. It was true spiritual fatherhood, a way to lift and restore. Then, the most surprising thing happened. Years later, Paul changed his mind. In one of his final letters, while imprisoned in Rome, Paul sent a message: "Bring Mark with you, because he is very useful to me for ministry." 2 Timothy 4 verse 11. This is remarkable. Paul, the same man who had previously rejected Mark, now considered him indispensable. What happened between these two attitudes? Something powerful. A process of redemption that goes beyond Mark. It's also a lesson for Paul, who, over the years, learned to look beyond the mistakes of the past and recognize God's grace at work in Mark's life. Mark's journey, from abandonment to acceptance, is a testimony of God's grace in action. For Mark, this moment was a reward for his persistence. He wasn't just restored. He was also recognized by those who had once doubted him. This is the power of redemption. Not only Mark's, but also Paul's, who learned to look beyond past failures and recognize the value of Mark's work. He finally saw Mark's worth not through his mistakes, but through God's transforming grace. But John Mark's influence didn't stop there. He did something truly extraordinary. He wrote one of the four Gospels. The Gospel of Mark is a direct, exciting, and action-packed account of Jesus' life. His writing is remarkable for its urgency and movement, perhaps reflecting his own understanding of how the mission of Christ cannot wait. It's a gospel that quickly moves from one event to the next, highlighting Jesus' miracles and words with palpable energy. The Gospel of Mark isn't just a record of historical facts. It's an urgent invitation to follow Jesus, to understand Christ's message and mission in a practical, immediate way. It captures the essence of Jesus in a way that speaks directly to our hearts. This can be seen as a reflection of Mark's own journey, a life marked by twists and turns, but also by a mission with an urgent and powerful purpose. John Mark's life is a clear demonstration that failure is not the end. He was rejected by one of the greatest apostles, but he rose up and became a key figure in the early church. He made mistakes, but he got back up. And in the end, his legacy was not defined by his failure, but by his resilience, faith, and the way he gave himself to God's purpose. This is a lesson we should carry with us. Failure is not a final destination, but a step in the growth process. Mark didn't just rise up. He used his testimony to take the message of Christ to the world in a unique way. His story was written in his own life and later on the pages of the gospel. His recovery was part of a larger plan of God, who used his failures to demonstrate the power of his grace. It's impossible not to see how applicable this is in our own lives. How many times have we felt like Mark at the beginning of the story? Failing hopeless, afraid that our mistakes will define our future. John Mark teaches us that even in our moments of weakness, God can restore us and use us in ways we never imagined. He teaches us that our mistakes don't have to define our identity, but can be used as a springboard to an even greater mission. God has the power to transform our failures into victories, and He can use us in ways we can't always understand. So, What do you think? Have you ever felt like Mark, maybe failed and wondered if it was possible to redeem yourself? John Mark is living proof that the story doesn't end in our worst moments. Leave a comment and let's talk about it. If you enjoy these deep dives into biblical legends, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep exploring the past to understand the present. In our journey of faith, it's essential to understand that what seems like the end is often just the beginning of something much bigger. Mark's story isn't just a story of personal triumph. It's a story that reminds us of God's patience and the importance of never giving up, even when things seem impossible. Mark didn't finish his journey on his own. He was shaped by God and those around him. And this is a crucial lesson for all of us. As Paul wrote in Philippians 1 verse 6, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Mark is the perfect example of that promise. John Mark is the embodiment of this verse. He started his journey with failures and challenges, but he ultimately completed his work with faithfulness, leaving a legacy that continues to impact Christians around the world. He didn't just fulfill his mission. He did it with a passion that continues to resonate through the ages. Just like him, we can have confidence that God will complete the work he began in our lives, no matter how difficult or full of failures the path may seem.